Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chelsea Byers, and I work for U of I Extension, and I'd like to welcome you all to the second session of the Nutrition, Wellness, and Brain Health Seminar Series. This is a series collaboration between U of I Extension and the Interdisciplinary Health Sciences Institute at University of Illinois. It is designed to connect the community with researchers at the university and provide evidence-based educational programming. Your feedback is incredibly valuable to us, so we'd love to hear from you what topics you'd like to learn more about. So we do have a survey in the beginning to gather kind of some information about demographics, as well as there's going to be a quick survey at the very end of the session, just for questions. So look for that link in the chat box at the end. If you're new to Zoom, a couple things to note. One is that if we have any interruptions with internet, just please be patient, especially if we lose our speaker. She will get back on, so just stay tuned. Also, if you are new to Zoom, there is a chat box, so if there's any questions during the program, please just type those in the chat box. I will be monitoring the chat box. If you're calling in on the phone, just hold your questions to the end of the session. Feel free to write those down so you don't forget those, or that would just maybe be me. Now, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker for our series. Her name is Corinne Cannavale, and Corinne received her Bachelor of Science in Molecular and Cell Biology with a minor in chemistry from U of I in 2017. She's currently a PhD student in the Body Composition and Nutritional Neuroscience Lab, where her primary research investigates how memory can be enhanced through diet and exercise. So today she's going to be talking to us about early life, nutrition, and brain health. Corinne, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. And as Chelsea mentioned, there is a chat box, so if you guys do have questions, just put them in there. She's going to kind of find some easy spots to insert questions. That way I'm not monitoring both. So if I don't see your question right away, it's not that I'm trying to ignore you. I'm just not looking at the chat box. So as Chelsea mentioned, we're going to be talking about early life nutrition and brain health this week. So I first just wanted to kind of go through the idea of brain development through pregnancy and infancy. So I attached this figure here from an article that I found online that kind of looks at how the brain develops over pregnancy. So you can see starting at week 3, we're getting what's called the neural tube formation. So this is basically what forms our entire central nervous system. So it becomes our brain, our spinal cord, and kind of is what we then use to develop a whole functioning nervous system. At each one of these time points, it's also highlighting some other important neurodevelopmental milestones, such as neuronal migration, structural formation, synaptic pruning, and then myelination, which is basically the insulation that allows us to send signals through our brain. So we have a lot of different development that goes on during pregnancy, and this will extend out beyond once the baby has already been born. So brain development does not stop at the end of pregnancy. It actually will continue on all the way into adulthood. And what's really interesting about the infant brain is that we can use other species to study how the brain is developing. So here I've included a chart that just looks at something called Carnegie staging. So this is basically just a way that we can look at different developmental milestones in the brain across species. And so what's really interesting is, as you'd expect, you have things like the baboon and the rhesus monkey, who are very closely related to humans, and they seem to have similar developmental trajectories. But one animal model that's actually really useful for studying nutrition and brain development is the pig model. So you can see this purple line down here. And with the pig model, it doesn't look like it would be exactly the same just based on looking in this graph, but really the only difference is, or the only large difference, I should say, is just the timing of these. So if you're looking at the human versus the pig line, they follow very similar developmental trajectories. And so we can learn a lot about infant brain development through pig models. We actually have a lab on campus run by Dr. Ryan Dilger, who studies a lot about infant brain development, nutrition, and uses a piglet model to do that. So just a little bit about brain and nutrition or brain development in infancy before we get started on nutrition. Does anybody have any questions on these things before we move ahead? Okay. Okay, so when we're talking about nutrition and prenatal brain development, there are a few different nutrients that we kind of want to highlight for pregnant mothers to be consuming, because those are going to be really important for reaching these developmental milestones for the infant. So some of these nutrients include proteins. So protein's really going to help with proper neuron and cell growth in the brain for the infant. And we're also looking at some micronutrients such as copper, which helps with the building of neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are basically the chemicals that allow our brain to signal, fire signals across different neurons. And so if we're building neurotransmitters with proper nutrients, then we can ensure that there's going to be proper development of the brain. We can also make sure to be having higher levels of iron in our diet. So iron is going to help create that myelination, or the insulation on neurons. So basically, when a neuron fires a signal, you want to have a properly insulated neuron, because that insulation is going to help a signal fire properly. And so it'll lead to fast processing of these signals, and also ensure that these signals are getting transmitted all the way through to the regions of the brains that they need to go through. We can also look at this nutrient called choline. So choline is actually a really interesting nutrient. It helps build a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which helps with signal processing again, and is implicated in a lot of our cognitive processes. And it also helps with DNA synthesis. So it'll help make sure that we are producing enough DNA for our infant is producing enough DNA. And then it'll also help create that insulation, or the myelination around the neurons. We also are interested in zinc. So again, zinc will help with that DNA synthesis, and also with building the neurotransmitters that I talked about earlier. And polyunsaturated fatty acids. So these will also help with neuron development, as well as creating that insulation for the neurons. And so all of these nutrients are super important for making sure that we're reaching like the adequate levels for consumption during pregnancy. And I did highlight a few foods that we can get a lot of these nutrients from, but I'd like to highlight the fact that these are not the only nutrients that you can get these specific, or the only foods you can get these nutrients from. So things like red meat are going to have protein and iron, and beans and lentils are going to have protein, not just iron. And so we have a lot of crossover. So you can see I kind of just drew some arrows to help show you guys how much crossover there are in these groups. So it's more important to think about having a whole, well-balanced diet, including all of these things, and including high nutrient density foods, rather than just aiming to look for one specific nutrient in one specific food group. I'm going to move on to the next slide unless anybody has any questions. Okay. So moving ahead a little bit into some other nutrients. So these two nutrients, DHA and folic acid, are really, really important for pregnancy and brain development. So DHA is a polyunsaturated fatty acid. A lot of people know about it because it's really rich, or I guess fish is really rich in DHA. And so DHA is really important for neuron insulation, so it helps create that myelin sheath. And then it also is really important for neuron development. And folic acid, which is a nutrient that's found in green leafy vegetables and other plants, plant proteins and plants. Folic acid is also really important for that neuronal development. But these are very highly needed during pregnancy. And so it's really important to make sure that we are supplementing in in the case of pregnancy, because we want to ensure that we're getting enough of these nutrients. So your diet alone might not adequately cover all of these nutrients. And so looking for a prenatal supplement that includes folic acid and DHA is going to be really important for proper development of the brain for your child. And so, as I always like to highlight, and I highlighted last week a little bit, science is really about asking questions. So we are still really learning a lot about nutrition in the brain. So there's really not all that much that has been done since this is a pretty up and coming field. But we do know a few things regarding nutrition in the brain. So when it comes to optimal brain health and the idea that there is a certain diet that may or may not impact our brain better than others, we really don't have any kind of outlined nutritional recommendations. So any of the nutritional recommendations that you're going to find are not going to be outlining for optimal brain health. Those are going to be more geared towards cardio and metabolic health. But a great rule of thumb to kind of abide by when looking at this is that heart health and brain health are very similar. So if you're consuming a diet that's going to be really healthy for your heart and for your metabolism, then it's likely always also going to be really good for your brain. A lot of the benefits that certain diet patterns that have on your heart and on like your blood vessels translate into the brain. And so it's really important that while we're looking at these things, to be aware of the fact that we're not getting nutritional guidelines for our brain, but following proper guidelines is going to be a great surrogate for doing that. And so I actually included the link here to the myplate.gov website. And they have a really great resource called the MyPlate Plan, where you can include your height and weight and your age, and it will recommend meals and diet patterns for you that follow the MyPlate guidelines, which are outlined guidelines for balanced nutrient load for regular consumption. So I included that here if you guys want to learn a little bit more about that, or if you just Google like the MyPlate website, they'll bring you to all of the different resources that they have available for you guys to use. And it looks like Chelsea actually just threw that in the chat for you guys as well. So I wanted to talk briefly about breastfeeding and infant formula and kind of what we know right now about infant formula and breast milk and how that can impact the brain. So human breast milk contains a lot of nutrients that are really important for development. So as I spoke last week, if you guys were around when we were in Logic 2 weeks ago, nature is really putting together nutrients into a food source very intentionally. So breast milk is really composed of all of these nutrients that our body has known and kind of evolved to figure out what's going to be best for us over all of these years that we've been around as humans. And so by studying breast milk, we can create really good substitutes with infant formula because we can kind of get an idea of what our body knows is important for infants to have as they're going through those beginning developmental stages of life. So a really great example of how breast milk can inform us about nutrients that are important is the idea of carotenoids. So carotenoids are plant pigments. They are a certain nutrient that have antioxidant abilities, and basically they're what makes green, yellow, orange pigments. So the big one that people always think of is beta carotene. Beta carotene is what gives that orange color to carrots. But there's also a variety of other carotenoids such as lutein and zeaxanthin, and those are going to be giving more of those like yellow-green colors that we see in plants. And so you can see here, this is some breast milk colostrum at 3, 5, 6, and 25 days. You can see it very early on in kind of the the colostrum yellow, versus at 25 days, we have almost no yellow pigmentation. And so basically we can see that visually that our breast milk is somehow depositing these nutrients into it, even though we're not entirely sure what carotenoids might actually be doing for brain or for health in general, and why we might be doing that. So we do know that carotenoids deposit in the brain, but we're not actually sure entirely why they do that yet. And so by studying breast milk, we're able to kind of infer that these may be important nutrients for proper brain development. I know that's kind of a long-winded explanation, so let me know if you guys have questions about this, this example. And so then just looking at breast milk and infant formula, and kind of now applying what we can learn from breast milk to our assessment of formula. So here I have two different nutrition labels for infant formulas. Both of these are commercially available, but there are some discrepancies in the different contents of these formulas. So the first one we're going to look at is this linoleic acid. This is a omega-3 fatty acid. So you can see that one of these formulas, formula number 2, has about 200 milligrams more of this fatty acid compared to the other one. So not that large of a difference, but enough that it's something to think about while you're kind of choosing an infant formula and what's going to be best. Another thing that really is what to highlight here is that the formula on the right has multiple carotenoids. So it has beta carotene, lutein, and lycopene. There are no carotenoids in Formula 1. And so we're not getting that same nutrient composition that our breast milk is creating for the child in Formula 1 when compared to Formula 2. And so this is just looking at an actual example of where some infant formulas may not be using the exact same nutrients as what is present in all infant formulas, just because we're not entirely sure why some of these nutrients might be important yet. And then just moving forward to look at some guidelines to look for when choosing infant formula. So we want to make sure that we're reading the label, obviously, and we can use a lot of the kind of tools that we talked about last week with evaluating labels with supplements, and just making sure that we're choosing a formula that has nutrients that are important for your baby's development. And so something really great is the American Academy of Pediatrics has recommendations. So for example, they recommend iron fortified supplements, because iron, again, is really important for building neurons and that insulation of neurons. So they really recommend that you have an iron fortified formula. And so going to their website and kind of learning more about what they recommend is a really great resource when you're at the point where you're choosing an infant formula to use. Another thing would be to pay attention to allergens. So a lot of babies will end up having allergies, and so you want to make sure that you talk to your doctor to kind of figure out how to be aware of what allergens might be present in your infant formula that might affect your baby. So things like lactose or dairy/milk allergies could be found in a cow's milk formula, and then there are some infant formulas that have a soy formulation. So if your baby ends up having a soy allergy, then that's something to also keep in mind. And then the last one is just doing some research and talking to your healthcare provider on what nutrients they feel are important to include. So again, it is going back to things like carotenoids. So for example, they're not present in all infant formulas, but as you kind of do some reading, you can kind of see that carotenoids might be important for infant brain. So again, like I mentioned, they deposit in infant brain. They have some activity in the eye later in life. And so there is a thought that they are useful for brain, even though we don't actually know what that role is yet. And so making sure that you do your own reading, talk to your healthcare provider, and kind of see what is out there so that you can make an informed decision for yourself on what you're going to be choosing for an infant formula. Do you guys have any questions about infant formula, breast milk? I don't see any questions showing up in the chat, so I can also move ahead. This is just key takeaways for this week. So the first one, making sure that we're keeping a balanced diet during pregnancy. This will provide balanced nutrients for both yourself and your baby. And then also making sure that we're taking some kind of prenatal vitamin that includes at least DHA and folic acid, so that we can kind of make up for where diet might be lacking. The next would be brain development after birth. So as I mentioned, the brain develops a lot during pregnancy, but continues development long after birth. And so making sure that either the infant formula that you choose, or making sure that you are consuming a healthy diet while breastfeeding is really important, because everything that either you consume through the breast milk or the formula that you choose is then going to go into kind of how your baby's brain develops. And then the last one is just evaluating the infant formulas that you're purchasing. So taking advantage of learning what science has learned from breast milk, and then choose a formula based on that informed decision. So again, looking into resources online. If you have access to journals, which I know is not accessible to everybody, just with paywalls and whatnot, but finding out different information from either the American Academy of Pediatrics or the World Health Organization to kind of better inform your decision for what you're going to be choosing when you choose an infant formula. So with that, I'll let you guys kind of ask questions before we move on. I have a activity at the end that we can do, but I figured I'd leave it open to a little bit of question and answer, and then we can kind of do that activity. And then I also included the form for today's feedback to just let us know how we're doing, what you want to see in the future for both this series and any additional webinars that we could be putting on, and kind of what you'd like to see moving forward with the rest of this series.
Phone to unmute, you can do *6. That will mute and unmute your phone if you are calling in and you have a question. So if you have any questions and you're calling in, feel free to unmute by hitting *6. And if you have any other questions for Corinne, feel free to type them in before we do a little activity.
Yeah, so the question, if you guys can't see it in the chat, is just asking about vegetarians and do protein supplements work the same as getting them from animal food? So I honestly am not too sure about like protein supplements. I'm assuming you're asking about like whey protein and stuff like that. From what I know, I think a lot of vegetarians do use them as good supplements, but I'm going to look into that and let you know. Outside of like protein supplements, there are a lot of like plant-based sources of protein, so those are also really good to kind of make sure that you're consuming during pregnancy. So things like chickpeas, beans, tofu. So any kind of plant-based protein is a really good substitute. But again, I'm not really sure too much about like protein supplements, like whey protein. So what I can do is next week, I just wrote that down. So I'm going to look into it. And next week, if you're here, I can kind of talk a little bit more about protein supplements.
And two more questions popped in. Can you see them, Corinne?
Yes. Okay, for food for each nutrient, I don't have any foods in particular that I would recommend. I included some photos on that. I can go back to the slide so that you can see it. So I included some examples just so you guys could get an idea of what these nutrients and vitamins and minerals can be found in. But again, there's not really, I don't know that there's one end all be all food, as long as you're keeping a balanced diet and making sure that the foods that you're consuming are going to be high nutrient density, meaning that they're going to have large levels of multiple nutrients and not just empty calories, then that would be my best recommendation for that. And then the next question is about carotenoids. So they're asking about the image of the carotenoids in the colostrum that I'm showing. So this was actually just looking at exclusively at the in the colostrum of the breast milk. And so basically what they've found when studying carotenoids in breast milk is that basically the body is depositing carotenoids really early on in breast milk, but later on it's just not as high of levels. So you're still getting carotenoids later on, just not in as high levels. And then, yeah, basically it's just showing the decrease of the amount of carotenoids that happen as more time goes on during breastfeeding. And then it looks like we have somebody that has just shared their audio so they could ask a question. Are there any other questions? Okay. So what I'm going to do is move on to the activity so you guys can kind of get a better feel for evaluating diet. And so here I've included two different like theoretical people and a diet that they would follow sorry, during pregnancy. So each one of these people is doing some things really well with their diet, but then also lacking some vital nutrients and vitamins and minerals within their general daily diet. So I'm going to have you guys go ahead and take a look at this slide for a few minutes and go ahead and just either put it up in the chat, or if you want to share your audio and let us know what you feel like each one of these people are missing from their diet, and how you would kind of substitute in foods or add additional foods for them to be consuming a more well-rounded diet. If there are people on, I'm realizing there might be some people on just audio. So it looks like for those people that are on just audio, I can also, let me know if you want me to read through the two diets. I'm not sure if Chelsea shared the slides.
I did not.
Okay. So the first person, for breakfast, they're going to have whole grain toast, some plant-based butter, 2 hard-boiled eggs. For lunch, they're going to have chicken breast, some brown white rice, black beans, tomato salsa, shredded cheese, and then for a snack, they had some almonds and yogurt. And then for dinner, they had salmon and some quinoa. And then for person number 2, they had yogurt, an apple, and some peanut butter. For lunch, they had a salad with cucumber, tomato, and dressing. And they also had their prenatal vitamin. And then for a snack, they had an avocado and some toast. And for dinner, they had brown rice, sweet potatoes, spinach, zucchini, onion, and some dressing.
We're getting some
Looks like some
answers
people
in
are,
the box. Yeah.
yep. Yeah. So, yeah, you guys picked up right on what I was doing. So the first person is really missing like fruits and vegetables. So I was very intentional to not include anything that is green, or really the only vegetable that they have is like a tomato salsa, I think I put in there. And so, yeah, they're really missing any of those fruits, vegetables. Kelsey also pointed out that they're not taking a prenatal vitamin. Looks like Helen also said she'd love to add more green leafies to that person's diet. And then I think somebody also mentioned something else, but now I can't find it. So yes, and oh yeah, so it was extra calcium and vitamin D. Yeah, so I don't know that I intentionally did that, but yeah, you could be onto something, because it looks like both of them is kind of lacking in the calcium and vitamin D. They do have the yogurt and the cheese for person 1, but again, a little not super high, maybe not as much as they should need. For person number 2, you guys also identified it. They're really lacking in protein, so I tried to make this one more of a vegetarian diet. But again, going back to the idea of for vegetarians using like protein supplements and animal proteins, so that the second person really needs more protein in their diet. So things like adding beans to their dinner would be really helpful. Chickpeas, tofu. It looks like right now their only source of protein really is that peanut butter that they had with breakfast. Do you guys have any other questions? Oh, I think I have an animation actually. Yeah, I think that depends on the activity level and the person. I honestly didn't think about calories when I was putting this together. I was more just focused on the specific nutrients. So yeah, that's something that, like, depending on the person and how much activity they're getting, then calories would kind of be something that's more lenient depending on the person. And again, that's something that those My Plate guidelines will put together for you if you end up using those at all.
I'm going to share a link in the chat box, and it is geared to older adults, how it's written, but it's a great resource, and you can just download it as a PDF. But inside of it, it has good examples of things that are like proteins, you know, different food categories. And so even though we're talking about nutrition in early life, this would be a good resource just for some information if somebody's trying to see some foods that have, you know, high protein and that kind of thing. And then, like I said, if you go online, there is a PDF that you can download, and it talks about, of course, you don't want to limit calories really if you're breastfeeding. You want to have, you know, good nutritious food, but it shows you kind of different vegetables and kind of size equivalents of serving sizes, and talks about different grains and that kind of thing. So I just threw that in there as a nice resource. It's from the National Institute on Health.
Yeah, thank you, Chelsea. Yeah, and I think that'll be a cool thing to highlight too, just because if you guys stick around for some of the other sessions, you'll realize that a lot of the nutrients that I'm talking about today are very important for brain and proper brain function and development throughout the lifespan, so not just in childhood. So you guys will definitely hear me talk about carotenoids again. I'm a little biased because I study carotenoids, but we'll talk about DHA again. We'll talk about a lot of these nutrients throughout the series. So a lot of the nutritional recommendations that you see out there can definitely be kind of concatenated into the idea that there are a lot of nutrients that are going to be helpful throughout the lifespan. You guys have any other questions or comments? Let's see. The first lesson recorded posted somewhere for people to access yet. That would be a Chelsea question. I'm not sure if where that's going to be posted as of right now. Chelsea, do you know?
We did not record the first lesson.
Oh,
because you were live, so we do not have the first one. Yeah. So sorry.
What we can do is I could work on making that like a more accessible PDF format if you want me to share the slides, and that way we can have at least the slides available for the first session.
We could go back and have Corinne, if she's willing, do a
voiceover.
A voiceover, yeah.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that too.
So we could do that.
Yeah, and then with that, like, because we, as of right now, we're going to be holding all of these on Zoom. Like, feel free to share these sessions and the registration with people outside of the Champaign-Urbana area. We can kind of take advantage of this strange situation that we're in right now with social distancing and everything that's been going on to hopefully let this be more accessible to people outside of this community. So feel free to share this with anybody you think might be interested in it.
All right, are there any other questions? I threw the evaluation for today's session in the chat box. If you will please take a moment to fill that out. It's a quick eval, just a couple questions. We would appreciate getting feedback from everybody. All right, thank you everybody for coming today and joining us. Thank you for Corinne and IHSI for this wonderful partnership between IHSI and U of I Extension. And if we hope you can join our future sessions. The next one will be in 2 weeks. And Corinne, do you want to remind me what that one's on?
Yes, we are going to be talking about childhood nutrition and brain health.
Thank you.
So looking more at that next age group up after infancy.
I didn't have the list right in front of me. I was like, I'm pretty sure I know what it is, but I don't want to be wrong.
It's okay. Yeah. Yeah, and let us know in that Qualtrics forum if there's any additional things that you guys think would be helpful, just with us moving online, that either resources or, you know, things in addition to what we've already been supplying, so that next week we can make this even better in terms of being online.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.